Hi, I'm Eric Voss, and it's here, guys! Game of Thrones Season 7 trailer, our first look at the new season. HBO is calling this trailer The Great War, and it has everything we love about battles, cavalry charges, cities being sacked, pirates, big maps. Now, there is so much in this trailer, and I'm gonna break it all down, frame by frame, everything you might have missed, with some theories and predictions for what we'll see over these 7 episodes. So let's get started.
Enemies to the east. Enemies to the west. Enemies to the south. Enemies to the north.
Okay, so the opening shot shows Cersei in the Red Keep, and right away there's something interesting here. Cersei looks like she's wearing fur. King's Landing, remember, is normally pretty warm, so the fact that it's already sweater weather this far south suggests that she also must be feeling that winter is here, along with the threat that winter brings. Now, this first section of the trailer features Cersei listing her enemies closing in on her from all directions of the map. East, with Grey Worm and the Unsullied invading from Essos. West, Theon and Yara's Greyjoy ship from the Iron Islands. South, what looks like one of the sand snakes from Dorne sharpening a knife or a spear. And north, the little ninja north of the neck, Arya. By the way, it's interesting that the editing makes it so that the northern threat isn't, the King of the North, or even scarier, the White Walkers. But I guess that while those may be bigger threats, neither of them hate Cersei as much as Arya does. So in a way, that kind of makes her deadlier. Now, each of these threats and directions play over shots of the stone map table at Dragonstone. Now, very similar to the opening title sequence of every Game of Thrones episode, the camera soars over this, starting at King's Landing, following the King's Road north past Duskendale along the Blackwater Bay, then through the Vale of Arryn, then to the Wall. And this is interesting because this battle map is actually being shown not from the point of view of the Queen who's currently plotting her defenses, but from the Queen trying to unseat her, Daenerys. This table was built by Daenerys' ancestor, Aegon the Conqueror, who conquered Westeros on the back of his 3 dragons. And that exact history is something that Daenerys is planning to repeat. And another thing, check out how the angle of this shot on the table frames the fireplace in the background with the top where the wall is on the map. Now, a few shots in this trailer later hint at a huge battle sequence that's set in the north, probably later on in the season. And in this shot, making the wall look like it's on fire could be foreshadowing that battle. And before I move on, the music of Game of Thrones is always awesome. Composer Ramin Djawadi is really at the top of his game, and in this opening section he uses mostly strings, violins, but also upright double bass. And if you listen carefully with the perfect pitch that we all have, that super low bass note there is a C, which is the lowest possible pitch of any stringed instrument. Like normally the low note on a bass is tuned to an E, but if you release that string and make it looser, it can extend lower to a C.
This up here is called an extension, which allows the bass to go down to a low C.
So why does Djawadi do this? Well, for one, this is a super low note and it definitely produces a sense of dread, which is totally what Cersei is feeling as her enemies close in on her. But also, extending this low E to an even lower rock bottom C suggests that as bad as things are for Cersei right now, it's still possible for things to descend to an even worse place for her and all the characters when this great war really begins. All right, let's move on.
Whatever stands in our way, we will defeat it. We're the last Lannisters. The last ones who count.
Okay, so in this section we see that, like Daenerys, Queen Cersei has a big map of her own. She's converted the Red Keep courtyard into this big floor map like that Carmen Sandiego game show. Now, notice where Cersei is standing here. She's standing on the Twins. That's the location of the Lannisters' largest victory, the murder of Robb Stark at the Red Wedding, which ended the War of the Five Kings. But that area is also called the Neck of Westeros, as if Cersei is stomping on the neck of the Seven Kingdoms, choking them with her terrible rule. Meanwhile, check out Jaime here. That sword he's carrying is Widow's Wail. That's Joffrey's old Valyrian steel sword, which Jaime's father Tywin created by melting down the Stark broadsword Ice into 2 smaller swords. Now, Jaime carrying the sword is significant for a few reasons. According to George R. R. Martin, when Joffrey died, Widow's Wail was sent back to Casterly Rock, location that actually shows up later in this trailer. So maybe this means that Jaime was at Casterly Rock for this battle, retrieved the sword, and now he's come back to report to Cersei what happened. Also, remember the other other Valyrian steel sword that was forged from ice was the one Tywin initially gave to Jaime, which he then gave to Brienne, called Oathkeeper. So considering Jaime and Brienne are of course the star-crossed lovers that we all want to see end up together, hopefully these twin Valyrian steel swords will lead the way to this reunion. Another cool way that this could go is Jaime might use Widow's Wail to make another certain Widow Wail, Cersei. One of the big theories that we brought up in the past is the Queenslayer theory, that Jaime's destiny is to repeat his fateful decision to strike down the Mad King, but this time a Mad Queen. So not only would this affirm the Voluncar prophecy from the books, where the Wood Witch warned Cersei that she would die at the hands of her younger brother, this would be some nice poetic justice here, with Cersei dying from the same Valyrian steel of the Stark family that she screwed over so royally. Next, as the Lannister army marches into battle, which looks awesome by the way, we've never seen their armor look so vivid, we get this shot of Cersei on the Iron Throne, and notice how she's replaced the 7-pointed star with her Lannister lion. Remember, she did away with the state religion by nuking the Sept of Baelor at the end of last season, so it makes sense that she would remove any religious iconography and make things all about her now. Also, who is talking to Cersei in this shot? It looks like some man with short hair. And judging from Cersei's disgusted look here, I'm thinking it could be Euron Greyjoy. And the reason I think that is that Euron's storyline in the show seems to be following the character of his brother Victarion Greyjoy, who's only in the books. And part of that character's journey is to pledge to make an alliance through marriage. And that could be what Euron is doing here with Cersei, maybe offering to
get my big cock.
Now, whether or not it goes that way, I'm guessing no. Euron would still be the only potential ally that Cersei has left, and his fleet could be the only thing that protects her from the massive navy that Daenerys is bringing her way. Now, when Cersei implies that Tyrion is a Lannister who doesn't count, we cut to Tyrion with the 3 dragons on Dragonstone, and I'm guessing that Cersei underestimating Tyrion is definitely going to blow up in her face somehow. Also, notice how the sounds of the troops marching from the Lannister troops earlier continues through this shot as we move on to Tyrion on Dragonstone. The sound editing suggests that all these characters are in their own way marching to war. All right, let's move on.
I was born to rule the 7 kingdoms. And I will.
Okay, so here we see Daenerys' long-awaited homecoming to her birthplace of Dragonstone. The gates open up and she sees her Targaryen family sigil, the dragon, on the window of the castle above. I also like how this shot focuses on her touching the shore, kind of like a warrior coming home from war and kissing the ground. This moment is Dany's first contact with Westerosi soil since she was a newborn. Also, notice how the music in this section changes. There's heavier percussion, and if you listen closely, it sounds like a voice is whispering the 3 syllables of Khaleesi.
Ooh, do it again.
It's almost as if, as Dany returns to her ancestral home, on her way to the Iron Throne, she's remembering her past leadership roles, one of them being Khaleesi, that led her to this point. Next up is one of the most interesting parts of this trailer, the Unsullied sacking a city with Lannister banners, and yeah, that's probably either Casterly Rock or the larger port city that it overlooks, Lannisport. That banner kind of looks like it's in an L shape. So this is a big deal. This is the ancestral home of the Lannister family, and we've never seen it on the show before. Like, Casterly Rock has always been talked about, but it's always been considered untouchable. Remember, Robb Stark planned to attack it right after the Red Wedding, but obviously he never got that chance. But now that Cersei has made enemies out of everyone in Westeros, her Lannister army has probably spread thin across the countryside defending her rule, which could have left her home city undefended. And now it looks like Daenerys can deliver on Robb Stark's old plan, deploying the Unsullied to strike right at the Lannisters' heart by taking their home. Also, this would have even wider implications. Remember, the source of the Lannisters' power is their reputation as the wealthiest family in Westeros. The Lannisters always pay their debts. But in the past, Tywin revealed that the family is secretly broke. The gold mines of Casterly Rock have all run dry years ago. And now that an outside force is sacking the city, that secret could become public knowledge, causing Lannister stock to plummet, doing further damage to Cersei's power and reputation. All right, let's move on.
Your father and brothers are gone, yet here you stand. Last best hope against the coming storm.
If we don't put aside our enmities and band together, we will die.
Okay, so this next section takes us to the north, as in
The king in the north!
and joining Jon in Winterfell, if you look closely, is Brienne, who apparently made it back safely from Riverrun. And in this wide shot of the Hall of Winterfell, you can see Littlefinger on the side, along with Tormund, a wildling sitting among the northern houses. Also, there's one northerner who looks a lot like the pro wrestler Eric Rowan. Like, Clegane still sounds fun, and now we got someone who can tag in. But then we get this moment between Littlefinger and Sansa, and just like he did at the end of last season, Littlefinger is still trying to empower Sansa over Jon. Like, nothing against Sansa, but I would still say Jon is the last best hope against the coming storm. Clearly, Littlefinger is just trying to worm his way into influence by upsetting the power structure in Winterfell. And later in this section, there's a mysterious shot of Littlefinger's dimly lit face, either in the Winterfell crypts or maybe in a dungeon. So it's possible that Littlefinger's meddling could land him in trouble in Winterfell. And then after this icy shot of the northern gates of Castle Black opening up, we cut to fire, a jump cut of ice and fire, if you will, to Theon, surrounded by flames, maybe as a ship burns around him. I have more thoughts on this later. But we also see Melisandre at Dragonstone. Now, it makes sense that she would return to this place after Ser Davos banished her from Winterfell at the end of last season. This is where she first came into the picture, making sacrifices on the beach of the Red God and birthing brother-killing smoke babies. But look closely at who she's gazing down at, walking along the narrow pathway. That looks like Tyrion down there, along with a figure wearing a big cloak, and I'm guessing that's Jon. There's been a ton of leaked set photos that have hinted that Jon will appear at Dragonstone, so this could be confirming that. But also, based on this plea for unity that we hear from Ser Davos, it sounds like they're both on a diplomatic mission to Daenerys, trying to get her to join forces with them to take on the White Walkers. Remember, Dragonstone is also rumored to contain large quantities of dragonglass, one of the few known weaknesses of the White Walkers, so that could be part of their mission as well. But my prediction is that this whole meeting will be set up by Melisandre, who left things in a pretty bad place with Ser Davos and Jon, and is probably looking for a way to redeem herself. There are also two quick shots here of wildlings, or maybe northerners or rangers dressed up in wildling furs, running and then circling up defensively in a blizzard. If you look closely, one of these guys is holding a warhammer. So yeah, they're probably facing off against White Walkers, suggesting that these shots are either part of an excursion that people are making north of the Wall, or this is part of a big battle scene that's supposed to take place at the Wall, rumored to come later in the season. Okay, let's move on.
And then it doesn't matter whose skeleton sits on the Iron Throne.
Okay, this section shows us more battle shots with the cavalry charge by the Dothraki Blood Riders. Now notice how they synchronize when they rise and perch on their horses, preparing to leap off at the same time. I'm really excited to see how well choreographed this whole pitch battle is. Now, where is this battlefield exactly? My prediction is that Daenerys is going to divide her forces that we saw with her at the end of season 6. Like, we saw her send the Unsullied to attack Casterly Rock, which is on the west coast of Westeros. And then I think that these Dothraki are invading Westeros from the east in the Crownlands near King's Landing. Meanwhile, I think there's a third branch to Daenerys' forces, her navy, commanded by Yara and Theon, joined by the ships that we saw from the Martells from Dorne and the Tyrells from Highgarden. And I predict this navy is what will face off with the massive fleet of Euron Greyjoy, which is what we're seeing in this fiery ship battle. If you look closely, raiders from one ship are boarding the one that's on fire, and one of these guys is carrying a shield with Euron's sigil. And I think this is the same fiery place that we saw Theon in that earlier shot. It's looking like this battle with his uncle isn't going too well for him. And then check out this line from Ser Davos.
And then it doesn't matter whose skeleton sits on the Iron Throne.
Now, based on the lighting on his face and the words that he's picking, this seems like something he's saying to Daenerys in the Dragonstone throne room. Now, the image of a skeleton on the Iron Throne, well, is super spooky for one, but it also connects to Daenerys' vision back in season 2, when the Red Keep was destroyed and covered in snow, an apocalyptic future where no one wins the Game of Thrones. So hopefully Davos' scare tactics here will remind Daenerys of this memory and the overall big picture. We also get this quick shot of the Mountain, now wearing new black Kingsguard armor. Now, ever since Cersei resurrected him and stole the throne in one swift move to become an evil emperor, I feel like her relationship with the Mountain is very parallel with the Emperor and Darth Vader in Star Wars. And yeah, this new shiny black helmet and armor definitely completes that picture. Now, there are two quick shots in the Winterfell crypts where Jon seems to shove Littlefinger against a wall. It actually kind of reminds me of the way Ned shoved Littlefinger against a wall in season 1. 1. Now, this is interesting because one of the big questions after season 6 was, now that we know that Jon Snow's parents are actually Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, how will Jon find this out? And what will happen when he does? And one possible answer that I brought up before is Littlefinger. Remember, back in season 5, there was a scene with Littlefinger and Sansa in this same spot in the Winterfell crypts at the grave of Lyanna Stark. And when Sansa said that Rhaegar kidnapped and raped Lyanna, Littlefinger went silent and gave this interesting expression as if he knew more to the story. So it's possible that Littlefinger is one of the few people in Westeros who knows the truth about Jon's parentage. Now, sure, he wasn't there at the Tower of Joy, but Littlefinger was there at the Tourney of Harrenhal, which is where Rhaegar first made a move on Lyanna, handing her a blue rose instead of his wife, Elia Martell. Ooh, scandal. And maybe through his network of informants, Littlefinger learned that Lyanna and Rhaegar's love was actually consensual, and when Ned Stark returned to Winterfell with a baby, Littlefinger was able to put 2 and 2 together. I always knew the Honorable Lord Stark never father a bastard. So maybe Jon's outburst here is a reaction to Littlefinger telling him the truth. Like, either he thinks that Littlefinger's lying, "There's no Targaryen blood in my veins," or he's mad at Littlefinger for not telling him sooner, or he feels threatened that Littlefinger might use this information against him somehow. Like, if Jon isn't the son of Ned Stark, rather his sister Lyanna, that might kind of weaken his claim to the Lord of Winterfell and possibly the King of the North. Like, technically Sansa has a stronger claim, or Bran once people find out he's still alive. Or maybe none of this legitimacy stuff matters. Like, the guy did come back from the dead and win the Battle of the Bastards. That's a pretty strong claim. And before I move on to this final section, there's a quick shot of a crippled hand reaching out through a door. Now, at first, this opening looks like the one leading to the dungeon room that Cersei left Septa Unella in at the end of last season. But then look at these wounds on the arm. That looks a lot like grayscale. So I'm guessing that this is actually Ser Jorah Mormont, with his grayscale getting way worse. And maybe now he's forced into this quarantine dungeon. Okay, let's move on to this last part.
The Great Wall is here.
Wow, okay, lots of big stuff here, so let's break it all down. First, we're back at this Dothraki charge with a Blood Rider swinging his Arak, and that is a Lannister soldier there. So this huge pitch battle that we've been seeing shots of will be a showdown between the forces of Daenerys and Cersei, and I'm so pumped for this epic clash of queens. Also pretty pumped for this clash between these two, Yara and Ilaria, but they're not the only ones who are getting any action. There's also this shot of Grey Worm and Missandei getting some too. And then there's this look of Jon and Tormund running for dear life with Jon and Wildling first, suggesting that he was one of those guys in those earlier shots, and this is all part of the same big sequence. We also see Daenerys using a piece from her map table to knock over the Lannister lion like a chess piece. And this shot reminds me of the way that Catelyn and Robb moved pieces around on their war board as they planned their assault on Casterly Rock. And again, I think this callback is intentional, and Daenerys intends to deliver on that same goal. And then after we see these two figures fall in the water, escaping what looks like dragonfire, we hear the roar of a dragon and the most epic shot of this trailer. Drogon, grown to the size of a freaking 747, soaring over the Dothraki charge. And I might just be seeing things, but look closely at Drogon's head here. There's a little bump behind it, and that could be a spike or part of his tail, but I think that's Daenerys back there. There was actually promo material from the show that showed Daenerys on Drogon's back. If so, it would be amazing to see Daenerys lead the charge into battle, which would actually be a callback to the way Jon Snow opened the charge into the epic battle from last season, the Battle of the Bastards. Really, I cannot wait for this season to come back in July, but in the meantime, here's some lingering questions about this trailer and what we know about season 7. One, is Daenerys doing the right thing by attacking the Lannisters as much as we're dying to see her do so, instead of turning her sights north on the White Walkers? Like, I'm curious to see if that ambition to reclaim the Iron Throne at all costs will come back to haunt her in any way. And two, was there any character that you wanted to see more of in this trailer? Like, I know, it's obviously Sam and Gilly. Like, hopefully 4 of the 7 episodes this season will just be them talking about their baby. Really, I'm curious to see what Arya's next move is. Like, obviously she's headed to Winterfell, her home, but will she complete her revenge list? And will she reunite with Nymeria? We'll see. Okay, that is everything I noticed in this trailer. We're gonna start talking about Game of Thrones a lot more on this channel, so keep an eye out for more Game of Thrones theories and breakdowns, maybe some new Game of Thrones related shows with some special guests. And let me know what you think in the comments, and if you like this video, please hit like and subscribe to New Rockstars. You can also contribute to us on Patreon. Thanks so much to all of our current patrons. You guys are great, especially Wilhelmina Ebbison. You can hit me up on Twitter at EAVoss with any thoughts you have about Game of Thrones, or follow New Rockstars on Twitter at New Rockstars for updates on our videos. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.